Hey guys, it's Lynn Pratt. Thanks so much for joining me to paint this heart balloon with watercolor. Now I'm doing this for Valentine's Day, but it makes a perfect painting or card for a gift for a loved one for any occasion. So I hope you enjoy this. I also provided multiple reference photos so you could do this in different colors as well. I am going to do mine in pink, so I'll show you my color palette that I'm using. So on my palette, I have bright rose. Now, keep in mind that this does not have high permanence for this color. It will fade over time, but it's just such a bright, beautiful color. I love using it. You just have to keep in mind that it does fade over time. And then my other color is neutral tint. So because this is just 8 by 10 and a small painting, I'm just using two colors, but then I also have two mixtures. So I have a mid mixture that has more pink and a darker mixture that has some more neutral tint. Okay, so I just have those four different mixtures or colors that I'm working with on my palette. I have my line drawing traced out or drawn out, and you'll notice I do not have in my reference photo where that highlight is. That's because you're doing this in a light color, and if you have a line there around where that is, you will never be able to get it up, and you will constantly have an outlined highlight. So I don't have the highlight in, and I'll just show you how to avoid it while we're painting. I'm going to start with a size 10 Holbein Gold Round, but you can definitely use whatever is comfortable for you. And I am going around this highlight. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take my water, and I'm actually, for this part, just going to add the tiniest bit of pink into my clear water so that I can make sure that I'm not going over that highlight. So I've just tapped my brush into the pink with the water so I can make sure that I avoid that highlight area and go around it. And now I'll take the rest of my water out pretty close to the edge, not directly up to it, but almost touching the edge. And I can come down into this bottom part as well. And again, just avoiding that highlight area. And now I don't need the pink tinted water. It doesn't really matter, but I don't need to see where the water is on the rest of the paper. I just have the tiniest bit of pink tint around that highlight, so I'm aware not to spread any paint or go over it at all. And I can just add my water to the rest of the paper. Now, when you're doing a large wet into wet wash like this, you want to look at it kind of on the side, make sure that there's no big puddles so that you can smooth your paint on easily. Make sure you have it pretty close or right up to the edge. This one's a little bit too far away, so I'll just adjust that and make sure I even out my water. So I'm looking at it from an angle from the side, and I can see the light reflecting everywhere that I have a nice even coat of water. So now I'm ready to add my paint. So I'm going to go right into my bright rose. And again, I'm just going to make sure that I avoid that highlight area. And I'm going to take my bright rose and put a layer over my whole painting. So I'm going to do it quite a bit darker. This color is a very easy lift color. So if you can do everything for your main painting in one wash with an easy lift color, it makes it a lot easier. If you do have to come back and do another wash, that's not a big deal at all. However, you just have to be aware that this is not a staining color. It's an easy lift color. So when you come back to lift it, you need to be really careful that you're not lifting up that first layer of color that you have on there. So I've got this almost all the way up. Just come up this last edge here. And I have a nice, pretty even layer. I can have it a little bit darker right on this area that's a little bit darker. Come down Just add a little bit more to down here. Now again, if I was doing this large, I would be putting a lot more detail, probably doing this in many washes. I would have to pick a different color because I know that this one is not going to be good to put multiple washes on, but for this small, simple painting, this is going to be perfect. So now I'm going to go into my next mixture, again, that's mostly pink, but has some of the neutral tint in it, and put a little bit of a shadow over here, and then starting to come around on here. Gets a little bit darker down on this bottom. And quite a bit darker over on this right-hand side. I went outside a little bit right there, so I'll just even that out. All right, and it gets a little bit darker through this mid part. I'm going to go back into my bright rose, so I'm going to dry my brush and get a little bit more of the bright rose to kind of blend that in a little bit more. And then I'm going to go to my darkest mixture and add some of the darker areas. Now remember, when it dries, it will dry lighter than it really is. And I'm watching how long I have as far as drying time goes, because once it starts to dry, I really just kind of want to get out of it. And again, I can come back with another wash. So I think that's pretty good. When I look at it, it looks pretty round. I have that good color going. So now I'm just going to dry off my brush and just lift before it dries around this highlight just a little bit. I can definitely do a lot more once it dries, so I'm not concerned about it. But if I can lift a little bit up so I don't have to mess with it once it's dry, that's even better. I made mine just a little bit bigger than it really is, which is fine. And I think that's pretty good. My paint is starting to dry, so I really want to get out of it and just let it all dry. I'm still waiting for that top part to dry, so I can come in with my size 2 Holbein Gold Round, and I'm just going to come in with a little bit of my bright rose and just come down and paint my string, or well, this one's really ribbon, not string. You can definitely make it thinner if you want to, and just have it be string. I want a little bit of color variation, so I'll have a little bit darker at the top, maybe at the bottom, maybe add that first mixture in just a tiny bit. And then I'll come over on my little curly area. Again, this is just my bright rose. And I'm going to put a layer over the whole thing. And then I can come back and put in some darks and some highlights. So again, I'm just down to a size 2 brush, but you just want something with a really good point to make sure you stay in your lines, because this isn't some huge area. You can take your time. Just make sure you go right up to those lines and make that look super realistic. So now I'll come in and take a little bit more of my pink and add that in. In the end, I'll come back and lift. But now I'm going to go to my mid mixture, the one that has a little bit more pink. And I'm just going to add a little bit of the darks in there. And I'm doing this pretty dry, so I can kind of go up to the other area that I'm doing. But because this is so small, you don't have to go too crazy on it. If you're painting this larger, you're going to want to obviously blend those a little bit better, but you just want to kind of get the overall look so that you get that that's a little bit curly. And then I can do the same to my little bottom area here. Start again with just the bright rose. And then come in with that mid mixture in a pretty dry brush. And I'll put more details in there as I get closer, but I'll finish, let that dry completely, and then I can come back and adjust everything. My top paint is pretty much dry, so I'm going to come in with that first mixture that has more pink in it, and I'm just going to come in and put some of these little kind of ruffles where the edge of the balloon was. So if you have like a mylar balloon, there's kind of like a little ruffled edge where it's crimped together. So you can also not put these on, you know, if you don't want that little effect up on the top and you just want it to be a perfectly smooth heart. When you're tracing your image on, you definitely don't have to even add these. But I thought it was kind of a fun little element to kind of make it look a little bit more realistic, even though we're just keeping this really simple. So again, this is just with that first mixture that has more pink in it. And then I'll go and darken up where I need to over it. Okay, so just kind of as a first wash on some of those little areas. And then I'll go to my darker wash. So again, this is what I'm talking, my first wash, my second wash, the one that has more of the neutral tint in it, and the few areas that are quite a bit darker. I'll just add that kind of second layer over there. Kind of just make them stand out just a little bit more from the edge. And I'm not going all the way to the edge. I'm leaving like the outer edge a little bit lighter where the light was hitting it over on the other side. And then these get quite a bit darker, so for the very end ones, I'll actually go just into my neutral tint and add neutral tint over those last end ones where they get quite a bit darker. Okay, so they kind of stick out around that edge. This one gets a little bit darker too. But you can just make sure that they stick out against the edge so you kind of see that it has that little ruffled element to it. So now the rest of my paint is dry. So I'm gonna come in with a size 6 Holbein Gold Round. And I'm just gonna have regular water on it. Make sure I have a kind of a clean part on my paper towel. And I'm just gonna come around this highlight and kind of smooth that and then lift it. And then of course I wanna make sure did I drip on my paper? Go back to a clean part of my paper towel because I don't want to put this down in my highlight. I'm going to go up at that angle and lift as well. So I'm just going to go around this. Again, just moving my napkin so that I don't put paint where I don't want it on my white paper. And it's not quite as light over on this side. I'll switch out my napkin to get a new one. So you can see I'm just gently, this is how easy of a lift this color is. You don't really have to work it to lift quite a bit. Let's see, I'll bend this just a little bit more here. kind of coming up. And then I haven't touched right up to the edge yet. So now I'm going to switch out and go to my actual lifting brush, which is a Rockcliffe 250 LH, a size 0. This is actually an acrylic brush, so it's just a slightly firmer bristled brush. So it's not firm enough to really harm my paper, but enough to just lift up a little bit better. And I'll come right up to this edge and just blend that in a little bit more so that I don't have quite a sharp edge. I know in the photo it is sharp, so if you want to leave it as a sharp edge, you definitely can. I like it just a little bit more muted. So just blend that in the tiniest bit. And then this doesn't really have that light of an area under it, but in my painting it does. So remember, nobody sees the original photo, so you can totally make this your own. Now I lifted out a little bit too much. I'll put a little bit back there once that dries completely, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. So then I'm going to come in with my size 2 again, and I'm going to come back in with that darkest mixture. It's almost purpley. And I'm going to come in and put some of these marks in. So they kind of get just a little bit bigger in the center. So it's like a thin line and then a tiny bit bigger in the center. So some of them are just lines, but some then just get a little bit wider in the center. And this is not with the black. It looks super dark because it's up against the lighter pink color, but it is just with that darkest mixture. And I'll come in and just come in just like this and put the rest of these little lines in. I'm coming in with that mid mixture, so the second or the first mixture that has more pink in it, and just kind of in a dry brush manner putting some of the darkened areas in there, and then coming and putting some of the sharper lines and wrinkles into this smaller area. And then now I can come in with my darker color, and just now that this is dry, just put a few of those darker shadows in there to make that just pop a little bit more. Okay, and then let's see, come in through here, put some of these wrinkles in that bottom, and use that third mixture to kind of really darken right here and right under here where it gets a little bit darker. Okay, so now depending on how dark your whole thing is, you can kind of go in and adjust. Okay, so I have just a little bit more of a shadow at the top of my string, and I think I have enough of those darker areas in. So now I'm going to come in again, still with my size 2 brush, but I'm going to come in with a little bit more of my bright rose. And so you can stop at this point, but I'm going to come in with just a little bit more of my bright rose. And on this side, just add a few more of those kind of little lines that are in there. Now, you'll notice that I'm not doing them all exactly the same. You don't want it to just be like stripes going across. I'll do a few just with a little bit of that second mixture so that they show up just a little bit more. Depending on where you're putting them, you need it just a little bit darker or lighter. So over here, I'll use my darker color a little bit more. And I don't want to go too crazy because, again, it's a small painting, but kind of just to give it that effect that it has that kind of stretch on the outside. And then I'll come in with my size 6 and I'm going to adjust around that highlight. So I'm just going to take a light wash of my bright rose and just even that out just a little bit. Come right into the edge. Because when I lifted, it didn't come out perfect. Can make it a little bit darker down at the bottom. And I do not have a lot of water on my brush here at all. That's the key. That I'm just very gently going over it so that I don't lift the paint that's already there. Okay, just to darken that up just a little bit. So I like how that looks better. So at this point, I'm going to go in and lift some highlights. I'm going to start with my lifting brush because there's kind of some reflected light going on right down on this bottom area here. And I want that to come up a little bit more. And then it kind of has a few of these little areas that go in there too. And then right here, just a little bit going up this right-hand side to kind of give that reflected light look. And you don't have to go too crazy with it. You just want a little bit. And then there's a few areas that just picked up a reflection next to some of the darks. So once your darks are dry, you can go in and just lighten. So just like we put some darker areas in, I'm just really simply going back, going in between those darker areas and just gently lifting out. Again, you do not want this to be stripes. Get a little bit of a highlight right on the edge there. Blend this just the tiniest bit so I can come back and lift out just a few more of those highlight areas. Not going, again, I don't want to go too crazy with it because if I go too crazy with it, especially for this scale, if I was doing it big, I would be doing this a lot and really putting all the detail of all these kind of striations around the side, but I don't want to be going too crazy with it for the scale that I'm doing. So I think that's pretty good. I have a little bit more, just a tiny bit of reflected light, kind of right before there, right on this edge. Make sure I don't blot and then put it on my other paper. And then just kind of back up, look at it and say, okay, you know, what else is needed to really make this look a little bit more realistic? Pull up just a little bit more here. Make sure I have a clean part of my paper towel. Okay, I think I have to stop playing around with that. I will lift out just a tiny bit though to get that highlight where the light's really reflecting off my little streamer. And then I kind of have like a little highlight right in the middle on it as well. Blend that a little bit more. So I think that's pretty good. Again, I'm keeping this one just super simple. It's only 8 by 10. You can do this in just about any color. So if you do a color and then you add your neutral tint, just try it first. Neutral tint will darken just about every color nicely, but sometimes, like if you're doing a yellow, you can't use neutral tint, you have to use something else to darken a yellow. So just try it out first, you know, before you do that. But you can use other colors, especially if you decide to do this a little bit larger. You can use other colors to lighten up or darken your color that you're using. If you're painting this bigger, you can use more than one color. So you kind of fade from a mid pink to a dark pink to a darker and use other colors in it as well. I'm just keeping it simple for like just a beginner fun little tutorial. You can also do this smaller at a 5x7 size, perfect for a little greeting card to send to someone. So I hope you guys like this tutorial and have fun with it. I can't wait to see what you do with it. Let's paint.